Carries. Call for motion to enter into public session.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Please rise for the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, welcome everyone, and we're going to begin tonight with our Falcons of the Month. Hi.
If there's a problem with this microphone, we know it's.
Them are, yes, right.
Someone's they want to at the table. They don't really they do. Going up to this later. First of all, this is a great turnout, so thank you. This meeting during the month, we usually have two meetings. The meeting that we hold, the Falcons of the Month, is without a doubt our favorite meeting because we get to honor some students who have done some really great work. So it's really exciting for us. Tonight, we have the distinction of honoring our next group of Falcons of the Month. Each school in our district celebrates numerous students each and every month for being outstanding. We have asked our schools to select one individual from the many honored to represent the group. Therefore, the students we will be honoring tonight were selected because they personify the trait or characteristic being celebrated during this particular month. In other words, these students are the best of the best. So congratulations to the group as a whole before we get started with each individual. Each one of our certificates reads the same, and it says this: Certificate of Recognition. Whereas the philosophy of the education of the Niagara Wheatfield Central School District calls for aiding all students in the development and achievement of their potential. And whereas the primary goals of the school district include encouraging each student to develop a sense of values, instill a feeling of responsibility to self and to others, as well as an appreciation of good citizenship. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Niagara Wheatfield Central School District hereby recognizes the following students. The first student we're going to recognize tonight is Brianna Monahan. Brianna. Next, we have Bajir Ali. Next, we have James Kinney. Next, we have Nina Bachu. She deserved the applause, certainly. Next, we have Delias Jonathan. Next, we have Layla Jacobs. That concludes our Falcons of the Month for this month. I want to say congratulations one more time. Please give all of our winners a nice round of applause. We, at this point in the meeting, we'll take a little bit of a break, about 10-15 minutes, okay? There's punch, there's cookies, and maybe before you get there, there's a backdrop there if you'd like to take pictures, okay? So we take that break so families can take pictures if they'd like, okay, right afterward, all right? Congratulations again to everybody.
Call the meeting back to order here. Continuing on with residents' comments. Does anyone sign up? Open to the floor, anybody? Good. What's that? Yeah. Circling back, I think is,
Good catch.
we'll move to our budget presentations.
Okay, this evening, you're going to hear an update of our budget presentation. Some of the topics that we've covered prior, we'll go through a little bit more quickly. There's some new information here, certainly, including some additional information on reserves, some our recommendation as to how we'll close the budget gap with those reserves. So please, as we're going through questions, ask them during to Deanna and myself. We'll also give an opportunity at the end for any questions you might have. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So if we go back, all this slide was showing really was what the difference was in really the last 2 years in what was initially projected in the state for revenues versus what was later projected for state revenues. And you can see that those projections have gone up. That certainly, I think, made it a little bit easier for some of the decisions at the state level. However, it's really important to know that, today the state budget was supposed to be determined. It was not. So we're waiting on a decision. Some of the things I'm hearing, it could be at least a couple weeks. So it could be a couple more weeks until we hear what they're going to do. One of the big impacts there, and so I'll skip past this when we get to the slide, is that if you remember, the governor put up a 1% increase on foundation aid, whereas in both the Assembly and the State Senate put a 2% increase on top of foundation aid. So those are really important. That's a really important decision for us as a district. Even though the state believes that the receipts coming in are going to be better than what they were, there's still a number of risks. They're all on this slide. We shared this last time. Down at the bottom, the one positive is that certainly there's a significant amount of reserves in the state budget to close some gaps if they need to. Okay, I shouldn't say borrow from, to take from. We'll go over some of these things individually. These were some of the pieces of the governor's proposal. One part that's really important is the UPK piece, and we'll talk about that. The governor's proposal is $10,000 per student. Okay, right now we get about half that. It's a significant increase. What we don't know is in that proposal, would that mean that it would cover all transportation costs? If so, how would the transportation be, cost be paid to districts? That's something we don't know. We know that one of the two houses in the state said that they wanted to cover transportation costs. They wanted to do it through the current transportation formula. Okay. Now, if you could use some of the $10,000 to pay the district portion, and then the rest of it would be aidable, that would be good for the district. If not, if the district still had to come up with their portion and you didn't get the addition, you couldn't use any of those funds towards transportation, that would be a drain on the district. Okay, so again, those details haven't been really established that I've seen from their proposal that was the state senator, I believe's proposal. Again, you see April 1st there is the deadline that they were supposed to come up with a budget. Last year there was not an on-time budget. There's not one this year. So we'll see. The important date for us, April 24th, is deadline. Districts other than small city districts have to really have things prepared so that they can get things in for the May 19th budget. Okay, budget vote. We talked about this at the last meeting. It's worth mentioning again. The governor in New York State, just like all the governors around the nation, have the ability themselves to sign into this program, this federal voucher program. Any districts, any state that elects to go into this voucher program, what it does is it's an immediate tax credit for any family that chooses to do it. You say, well, what's the harm of that? The concern for public education certainly is that those are funds that are not going to go to the federal government. So then does that mean in turn that the federal government will provide less funding for education to states? My guess is yes.
Okay, so like Dan said, we didn't receive any additional state aid revenue projections directly like we did for the executive run yet because the budget's not passed yet. But so this is from the executive budget showing the 1% foundation aid increase. And then last time we went over what each of the other types of aids are. Here's the tax cap calculation again. I won't go into detail, but I wanted to point out, because it's relevant later in the presentation, that the calculation starts with last year's levy, what was actually levied, not what we were able to levy last year, but what we actually levied. So that's important when we talk about how much we levy going forward. Talked about the TRS rate that is actually going down from last year, so that's good. We have a significant number of retirements, so that actually means that our TRS expense is expected to go down as well. On the other side, ERS, which is the employer's retirement system for anyone who's not certified, that rate is increasing, as is the salaries associated with it, so that would be an increased expense next year.
And it is important to note, even with TRS, with the retirements, the fact that that's with TRS, that even though you have the retirements, even though the rate drops, when salaries go up, of course, you're going to be paying more for each salary, so that's important.
Here is a comparison of our tax levies over the years, with the average increase being 1.8% over 9 years. This is a summary of the department budgets that were presented at last meeting. This is a summary of just the increases that they were asking for. As you can see, all of the departments except for special programs is a 4.81% increase. Special programs alone is a 15.95% increase. And altogether, that's an 8.76% increase.
You know, just one thing I do want to point out here, when you look at the technology budget, if you remember last time, that a big portion of that increase has to do with what the district now needs to spend to protect our technology. And that is it's a brand new expense, not that we weren't expending anything on that before, but there's a new significant expense. We talked a little about that, I think, at the last meeting. And I know that when the departments were here to present, they went into some detail about that, but it's a huge expense.
Excuse me. So yes, this is a breakdown of those requests. So as you can see, the increased technology security is 131,000 as part of the request.
Yep.
So going forward, like we said, we have the numbers that we have from the state right now show a 1% minimum increase on our foundation aid. It's also floating out there that it could be a 2% minimum increase. So the following slides present both scenarios. So first we'll go through 1% and then
And
2%.
And what I guess I want you to think about is it's really what we're presenting, right? Our recommendation is here's two different proposals showing you the 1% and the 2% state number with how we would fill the gap if it was 1% instead of 2%. And that's what you'll see as the difference. In other words, some additional reserves being utilized to make up that difference.
Okay, so here's our revenue budget with the 1% foundation aid increase. Just to go through the different line items that are here, we have first real property taxes, which is the tax levy, which we talk a lot about. Next are other tax revenues. So we have payments in lieu of taxes and interest earned and penalties. Next we have services. We have our Native American tuition, which is the contract that we have in New York State to provide education to the students who live on the Tuscarora Nation land. Those that don't attend the Tuscarora Nation school, we educate and we get reimbursed by New York State for that. The next category is interest and earnings, and then sales and property type revenues. So right now we have a rental agreement with Bosie's at Eric Road, so that's one of those things in there. The next group of categories is miscellaneous, and then going up to the top of the next side there on the right side is the foundation aid. So that's the only number that's going to change between these slides in the above line revenues between the next scenario. The other aids that we talked about, and you'll notice that the aids in our revenue budget are different than what you saw on the slide previous. We have to split the aid that we receive with Tuscarora Nation School, which is a different budget. So the aid revenue that you see here is slightly lower because of that. We do it's a portion based on the enrollment. And then the final category is federal revenues. So we receive impact aid for to compensate for some of the federal land that we can't tax. So that's the impact aid, and then we receive Medicaid as well. So in total, let me go to the next slide because that highlights it a little better. The total revenues make up 92.52% of what we have proposed as the total budget for next year. And then the green highlighted lines underneath the revenue bar is our different types of interfund transfers and reserve usage based on actual expenses within the budget. So for example, the capital transportation reserve is what Greg and Leslie presented as being purchasing the buses and the facilities vehicles. So it's offset by this reserve. And the technologies plan for their capital reserve usage is this $200,000. So they're 1-for-1 in that regard. So we have the overall expenditure budget at $96,480,000. And then that line that I showed you on the previous slide with the revenue is $89,261,970 for so that the amount that we need is $7,218,000 to close the gap. Like I talked about, we have those planned reserve usages. So the transportation reserve, the technology reserve, we have a Greenway interfund transfer, which is for a debt that we have in the general fund that it's a plan to offset. And then the employee benefits and accrued liabilities reserve, which is we plan to use for the retirement incentives that we have linked to sick leave. So the balance to fund after that is $3,563,000. I'm just rounding. So then, what? We have other expenses within our budget that we have reserves set up for. So one example is the workers' compensation reserve, ERS reserve for the employees' retirement system and the teachers' retirement system reserves. So we would propose offsetting the expenses that are in the budget with those reserves. And then appropriating fund balance of $1,563,000.
Just important to note, I think when you look at the amounts that would be allocated from our restricted reserve and from our reserves. Each year, we allocate dollars from our reserves, right? The goal is to not utilize all of those dollars. And we've done a very good job of that for a long time now. The goal is to continue to keep as much in those reserves as possible. When the state looks at our stability as a district, our fiscal stability, it's one of the things that they look at is your reserve amounts. So in this scenario where it's the 1% minimum increase, the appropriate fund balance amount would be 1.563 million.
Okay. I mean, you keep on using the reserves. It's not gonna be no reserves, and you might not be able to put more money in the reserve next year or year.
That's exactly right, Rick. That's exactly right. And so, and again, we appropriate this amount from the reserves, where we plan to allocate this amount from reserves. And then when we come to budget, when it comes to expenditures, we don't use it. Our goal is to not spend all of it. But what a school district can't do is overexpend its budget.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
this past year's reserves, how does that look? I mean, are we eating into it? Is that the big concern there?
So it's a little too early to know exactly, but we won't be using all of the reserves that we appropriated last year.
No, as a matter of fact, I think last year I said that I thought this year we would be close and we'd be, we haven't really had to eat into it in the past. Whereas in going into next year, it certainly looks like we would eat into it. Now, I will tell you this, if I could go back, one thing that helped us a little bit here is if you look at the building aid amount, the second thing down on the right under foundation aid. By the way, I didn't point this out before, but looking at the foundation aid amount, you see that that's 27 million. You look at the real property tax piece, that's 38 million, right? 65 million of our $96 million budget comes from those two sources. So they're obviously huge sources for us. But one other area that we get a significant amount of aid back from is building aid. The fact that we just recently closed out a major phase of one of our projects, okay, or a couple phases. Rick Timms, who you've all met, Dr. Timms, who comes here and works with us on our long-term planning, had put those figures, in other words, what we'll start getting back in aid next year on the phases we just closed out into that building aid formula, okay? So that number adjusted by over $1 million, I think, from initially.
So based on our state aid runs, it was $4 million. He projected 7 million, but we're still not sure about one phase, so he left $1 million out of it.
So I guess my point is, from even the last time that we presented, there's about a $2 million difference in revenues that's coming in building aid. And remember, that building aid is the money that we get back when we finish a project, and we get it until 15 years is what it takes to pay off, right? So for 15 years, we get the aid. Now, those amounts fluctuate as different phases of projects are paid off. One of the things that we've talked about when it comes to capital projects and doing them is it's important to continue to do them. Because if you don't, your state aid drops off and now you have a big hole. Okay, so obviously we're doing a larger one. You're not always going to do larger ones all the time, but the idea is you want to continue to do those because you get that state aid back and you'd have a drop off. But from the last time we were here, and as I think I even had sent you guys a presentation, I sent another one. It was that building aid number that had changed. So that really changed the revenues and what we feel like we would have to appropriate for next year. Okay.
Now, Dan.
Yeah.
This Amazon on Blackboard Road. They may get started sometime this year. Well, how does that affect? Does it affect any revenue?
Once they're operational, then it will for the pilot, right? So we have the pilot agreement that shows the amounts of those dollars going up. Right now, I think you talked with them.
I didn't get a hold of anyone,
Okay.
but, when I talked to I did talk to the county.
The
So
county,
I talked to the county and they said that because it's not finished yet, we wouldn't see the full amount of the schedule starting yet. But once it does, then we should see the full schedule.
You know, I know we've always talked, especially when Mr. Tim's about 5 years out. And I can tell you, it's really in the infancy stages, real infancy. And I know Mike and Craig know about it, but in the town of Niagara, potentially, they're talking between 100 and 200 new homes. And, or Bob too, on the planning board. You know, I mean, they're not breaking ground anytime soon, but, you know, you're talking about staffing, talking about, I don't know how many kids are gonna be in these facilities.
Yep, understood. You know, here's what I would say. The district has had significantly larger numbers in the past than we do now. We can certainly do it. What I would say is where those students are in the buildings and the redistricting, whenever that would come to fruition, right? We would have to adjust
If it comes.
if it does. Yeah. Let me get you back there. There you go.
So this next group of slides, looks at if we were to receive 2% minimum increase from foundation aid. So the only number that's really changing is that foundation aid number on the top right. It increases by $270,000. So that would mean that our total revenues increased by $270,000, and then $270,000 less would have to come from our reserves.
That's what that 1% means.
I don't know that I
don't think you need to go through
read through it.
You, in your packets, you have the 1%, 2% difference, but really it's just a change in how much we'd be using from the reserves of that 270,000.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On our reserves,
Mhm.
are we more or less than last time, last year? If you look that number.
In other words, the final of the amount that was in the amount that was being appropriated from the unappropriated fund balance.
Yeah. For this year, we're gonna be.
I'd have to look, Bob. I wouldn't wanna
Just
say.
saying that's kind of a.
It would be easy for me to pull up last year's presentations on the
it'd
thing
be
and take a
more
look, but
than Last year, and that's why.
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's probably about the same. I think it's gonna be close, but I'll pull it up. It's a good question.
Here is our current balances as of June 30th, along with what was budgeted for 25-26. So this includes that 3.5 million at the bottom. That total includes everything except for the appropriated fund balance that you were asking about. So this is what we have planned to use for 25-26. Like we said, we don't think that we would be dipping far into there. And then this next slide goes into the details of our different capital type of reserves. We just wanted to show you that there are different types for different purposes. The transportation reserves, we have capital improvements, capital technology, and then each reserve, when we put it as a proposition to the public to vote on establishing a reserve, we have to put a limit on it, and it's for 10 years. So you can see that most of the reserves there are full. And then we still have 3 reserves that we can add money into.
Deanna, could you go back to that slide that showed the appropriated amount for this year? So with the 2%, you see it would be 1.293, and so it was what, the $270,000 difference, so 1.5. So last year, it was what we were appropriating from the unappropriated fund balance was 1.9. So we would be appropriating less from the unappropriated fund balance for next year.
And to explain a little bit more, it may seem odd that because we have, at the top of this page, we had $1.9 million that we needed for closing the gap, but remember that the $1.7 million for the employee benefits for the retirements, that's not something we normally do because we don't usually have 29 teacher retirements in a year. So we normally appropriate, I think it's 450,000. So that's completely offset by that expense and that reserve.
With the idea that in the years following, it'll be a savings for the district.
Okay, so here we're back to the discussion about the tax levy. Our cap is 2.14%. That's a $100,000 increase over last year. As a reminder, the tax levy gets divided over the total assessed properties within the district. So it doesn't necessarily mean that each person's taxes will go up to the 14%. It depends on how it gets distributed. A lot of people, there's reassessments going on. And so I think it's important to say that just because an assessment with a whole town-wide assessment goes up, doesn't necessarily mean the person's taxes are gonna go up that much because it's being divided over the whole town, so. And then here's a chart that we've seen different forms of with Rick Timms presenting, which is the cost of staying below the tax levy limit. When we don't go to the levy limit, it sticks with us forever. So back in 2014, the board at the time decided not to go to the levy and was short by $400,000. Each year, that's $400,000 less in revenue that we can recover. And that compounds each year. So then again, in 2019, we didn't go to the levy again. So that added on to that previous 400,000 and so on.
I know, and we usually bring this out, but somebody had asked last time for us to bring this up, so. If you look, last year we were, it was 0.64% was the levy. Year before, the levy limit was 3.08, and you can see the numbers that you kind of went to in those years. What's important, and Deanna mentioned it, is that when you lose it, you don't get it back, right? So the tax levy limit is in essence set. The factor that they put in there, and you always hear 2%, is because that's the factor that's used, right? But that 2% factor results in 1.49%, 2.99%. Like those are the numbers that when you plug 2% in with all of the other factors that you have, that the state's saying you can go to without needing a supermajority vote. Okay.
And just add, and that's because of conditions that are within the district. So if your capital improvements are increasing, then they're saying, yes, levy more taxes to do that. If it's not made up for by aid or some other revenue source.
Impacting.
Yeah.
This slide's always here as a, or has been for a lot of years now, as a congratulations to the board, to our business office. When you look at that fiscal stress score, that's where you want that number. You want it to be really low. We were one of the most fiscally stressed districts in the state in 2013, 2014. We want to stay down near the bottom there. Okay. Questions? Thank you.
Presentation. Open the floor again to residents' comments. If you don't have any comments. Okay. Move on to our consensus agenda items. Need to do agreement with all the separate.
Well, you can, if that's on there, you don't have to, that's out there.
I will call for a motion to accept the consensus agenda items numbers 1 through 17 as presented. So moved. Second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. I'll call for a motion to approve the personnel items numbers 1 through 18 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Moving on to our standing committees, capital projects committee, States Bob.
As far as capital projects, the auditorium is still so far on target for May 20th. But other than that, we were there today, seeing some of the improvements that where they were the last time. And it's gonna really look sharp when it's done, I gotta say that much. But that's all I got right now.
Okay, thanks. Audit committee,
Yes, the audit committee met today. Mike, Craig, Dan, Deanna, and to go over the internal control risk assessment, and everything went well with it. And in the next month or two, we'll get together and pick what area we want to do the same type of assessment. That hasn't been determined yet today. That is it.
okay, thank you. Policy committee. we have Nothing from the committee. We do have first readings of a number of policies.
Except for the first readings from the last.
Yes,
Okay. Should I name it? State them?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We have first readings of policy 1620 annual organizational meeting. 1640 absentee military and early mail ballots. 5413 procurement uniform grant guidance for federal awards. 5681 school safety plans. 5674 data networks and security access. 5681 school safety plans. 7241 student directory information. 7513 medication and personal care items. 7521 students with life-threatening health conditions, anaphylaxis, and 7522 concussion management. Those are there for your review, and we'll vote on those next meeting, I believe. No problem. External communications to the board, we have internal claims auditor report. And that will move to our ex officio student members report.
I'd like to say that April 25th, right there, we have the Eco Campus, and I would like everyone to come. It'd be great. And all of our schools teams are starting off great for the spring season. And let's go Falcons.
Thanks. For president's reports, myself and other board members had the opportunity to tour some of our schools, all of our schools today. So that went well, and thank you to everyone who's involved with that. And yeah, our employees at the buildings for showing us around and the lunch that was prepared today. And then I'll move to superintendent's report.
Thank you. Nope. Thank you. First, I can't remember, Ethan, if you were at the meeting, the last meeting? Okay, so, the musical this year was Grease, and there was, a performance done at SUNY Niagara from our high school students, and it was incredible. Ethan was one of the leads in the musical. The students were, so much fun to be around. I got to play a small role that I didn't mess up too much. I don't think I didn't get any nasty grams or anything like that. But what was really cool was being able to be backstage and watch how the students interact with one another, watch how they care about one another, make sure that they're on time. The stage crew, if you've never been part of one of these things, they're incredible. They do so much to get everybody in position. If I could, on opening night, Ethan had a little mic issue on the one, right? Not your fault, it just happens. The incredible work that happened within I don't know, a few minutes before he had to go back out on
It was
stage.
like, yeah, like literally a minute, they took my mic off and I had to put it right back on. And I mean, I missed the scene, but they did it very fast.
But the microphone was, it's not like the microphones, it's like here and they gave you a new one. I mean, you're in costume and the work that was done backstage and how competent and calm these students were when they were doing this work was really impressive. So you just don't get to see those things. You just get to see the people out on the stage, and the performances were outstanding, but the people backstage were great. The adults leading the charge were awesome. It was a really great musical, and congratulations to all of our students. Our calendar for next year. So the board has already acted on a calendar for next year. However, since then, one of the larger schools in our BOCES has gone away from the 1 week in February and 1 week in April break. They've gone to 2. That pushed the number of students in our BOCES. Okay, so it's Orleans Niagara BOCES. Over 73% of the students that are participants within our BOCES are now at 2 weeks in April for next year. BOCES is changing their calendar, or did?
Yeah.
You already voted on it, you will. They're going to be changing their calendar. So that leaves us really as the last of the larger schools in our BOCES who would be at 1 week and 1 week. I'm not a proponent of the 2 weeks, just personally, right? For various reasons. I've maybe talked about those before here even. That said, our students who are in the CTE programs, who are in the special education programs, would be significantly negatively impacted by BOCES moving to the 2 weeks if we don't follow suit. Okay, most joint management teams, which include 4 BOCES, tend to pull in the same direction because students go to the BOCES in those joint management team areas. For us, that's predominantly Orleans Niagara BOCES, and we have a small number who participate in Erie BOCES programming. So all of that said, I thought it would be important to bring back to the board the calendar. Certainly this is a decision that's the board's to make. On this draft calendar, you can see that the February break would go to just having the 1 day off as opposed to that whole week off. Thank you, Dan. And then it would have the break in April, well, March actually is when it starts. It would be March through April, through the beginning of April. So, against my, I wouldn't say better, against my normal judgment, based on what BOCES is doing, I guess I would barely recommend that we make this change because of our families and our kids. In essence, the kids who participate would either have 2 weeks off, no weeks off, would have to make decisions about, what they're gonna do over the break when we're in session, but BOCES and vice versa. So that's the challenge that we're faced with when the decision's made differently within our BOCES.
You don't really need to recommend it. Based on the one school in BOCES, we can't leave dozens of our students in a precarious situation. It wouldn't be good. Some employees could be upset, but we're here to help with the kids. So I would make a motion that we change our calendar to the 2 weeks. And then, I don't know if it's a second or an old.
Yeah, we can handle it under new business or old business.
What?
So we can handle that under
New business.
old business. We have it.
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
Old business.
Oh,
So it's okay. I was just presenting it right now. And if anybody wanted to talk, that's all. That was
Well, I'll let you make the motion.
Yes, here we go. We know it's there. Okay, so that's that. If there's no questions, then I'm gonna jump on to the regional grid seminar. The regional grid seminar took place on March 10th. There was a really good showing, close to 100 people throughout Western New York participated. National Grid, NYSEG, NYSERDA were all there. They provided us with some really great information that was really important. Some of that information is, you could certainly argue is positive and for districts. Some of it points to significant costs for districts, for the state, and those costs are really in areas where there's structural deficiencies in the grid. Okay, and the real question, and this is what we're going to talk about more later in this school year, maybe even over the summer, is who's paying for that? Because if there needs to be significant upgrades to the grid, I just don't believe that should be on the backs of school districts. And when you need to add things that are not part of the grid and school districts have to pay for it, and all of a sudden, the budget that we've been talking about gets inflated, by the way, with a 2%, levy limit, right? That at least for the formula's sake, how do you do that? I just don't know how districts would do it. And that would be on the backs of kids in years to come. They'd be the ones negatively impacted. Because if you remember, for us, as we looked forward into phasing in electrification for all the fleet that we would need, we're talking about a $10 million difference between over the years of the phase-in of what we would spend versus what we would need, what we'd normally spend versus what we would need to spend if we went to full electrification. And
Brianna, come down to the break room for a treat. Brianna, come down to the break room for a treat.
Michael, get him.
I will just tell you, our clean crew's incredible. Jackie will be so embarrassed that was just a front of microphone. Yeah, I don't know. She will be really. So we're going to talk a lot more about this coming up, but I just, the costs that would be put to the districts is just very, very significant. Okay. And that bared out during this seminar. Pre-K registration has ended, but there's still spaces. So even though the time that people had to get in to be part of the lottery, there's no lottery, we'll start taking them as they come in. For pre-K, kindergarten is going to run through, the kindergarten registration is going to run through April 24th. Registrations are being taken between 8 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Okay. Jason mentioned the Board of Education walkthroughs. I just want to mention one thing about that. Board members don't get paid, not in our district. It's all volunteer. They do a lot of other things on the side. They're in other committees. They show up as, in audit committees. They do all these things. And today, just another example, a number of them were here during the day doing walkthroughs in all of our buildings to see some of the things that were going on. And, whether it was some of the students and some of the service projects that they're doing at one of the schools, or the incredible artwork, that's being done at another school. I think it's really important because, as board members, they have to make some really tough decisions about some really important things in programming. When you get into the schools, you get to see some of the really cool things that are happening. We bring some of those kids, like we did tonight, here to you. And you do get to see them in a lot of different facets. But it's a really important thing, the time that you give up, and I appreciate it. And so on behalf of the district, I just want to say thank you for doing that. The Eco Campus project, as was mentioned, April 25th. I know that Ethan is going to have a large number of people there again. We had a really good turnout. After the Eco Campus, on that same day, we have the Wellness Fair and we have the Wellness Walk. Okay, they're all on that one day. It's a really great, they're really great events here on this high school, middle school campus. So if you don't have it marked down already, the Eco Campus starts at 8 o'clock, goes to 11, and the other events take off right afterward. Okay, so it's that whole day. I have the NYSBA conference on notes under superintendent's comments because it's here in Buffalo next year. It's October 22nd through the 24th. So if you want to mark that down, I know some people don't like to go, when it's a little bit further. So this is here, it's local. Every few years it rotates back to us, which is really good. And then the last thing I was asked to talk a little bit about and bring to you, and I think you should have the form in your, folders. It has to do with turf field usage. You should have a document in there about field usage. I think it was last year, may have been the year before that. We revisited this. Just for those who don't know, when it comes to the turf field use fee schedule, you can see it, it's online. We have 3 different categories. One is for NW student athletics, what that is off season. That's $0 if it's the athletic program. We have NW based students or NW adult groups, and there's a rate for that. And then if you're an outside student or adult group, there's a different rate for that. That's the highest rate. So last year we reduced these rates, or the year before, and I was asked to bring this back to the group here to talk about a little bit. So I did.
Did you check by any chance what Lewiston did?
Here's what I know. I know that there were a couple districts who don't charge anything. I don't know who all of those are, Rick. Lewiston may be one. I think the Falls may be one. I don't know that they charge anything. If they're, and I'll use the name that we have here, NW based student or adult groups. And whenever I say that they don't charge anything, I'm guessing that they charge when there's overtime rates and when they wouldn't normally have a person there. They really couldn't do it otherwise because you'd be kind of a gift of public funds. So they probably are charging for people who have to stay, is my guess. They may charge if they're turning on lights. But I know there are a couple of school districts around that don't charge anything. Most charge something, and that's what we used when we put this together.
I have a question, Dan.
Yeah.
I know we do this for the fields. I know our auditorium. Are we planning to do anything with that?
We'll definitely have
Okay.
So we'll definitely have a schedule for that as well.
Yeah.
The one thing particularly about an auditorium is you're gonna have to be paying people who are gonna run those events, right? So if you have someone who wants to come in here and, use more than just a microphone in the auditorium, if you have the lights, the sounds, you're gonna have to have people, and it's a pretty specialized skill.
Right.
You're gonna have to pay to do those things. And certainly I wouldn't recommend that the district pay for that when the groups come in.
No.
They're gonna have to pay for that, and then we're gonna have to decide, would we model it something like this? Would you be charging more for groups that are not predominantly Niagara Wheatfield groups versus outside? My recommendation when we get there will be yes. I'm sure we're gonna start getting those asks.
Okay.
So the question, I know it wasn't intended this way, here's what I heard. Dan, make sure you work on a schedule so we have something ready, because we're getting close to this thing being done.
What's that?
Bob, I heard, you didn't say it this way, but it's something that we absolutely need to get ready.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you asked.
The only reason why I'm asking is because I know there's some people out there that for like next year or whatever.
We've had a couple groups already ask you about.
Hey, Dan, just so I understand it, chief. Well, the only people have asked me anyways, and the football. So it's 250 an hour?
No, look to the left, because if it's an NWAA group, it would be $75 an hour to rent the field.
75 an hour.
75 an hour. So let's say they're there for 4 hours, that would cost them $300 for
Right.
that. Then if there's no staff here already, right? So if you don't have anybody here and they had to pay for facility staff to be here. When facility staff come in when they're not scheduled, it means it's an overtime rate. So it's another $50 an hour. So again, if you're using a 4-hour event as an example, that would be another $200 on top of the 3. So it'd be $500 for those hours. We really haven't had to, because the groups have been really good, charge the cleaning rates. But if there was ever a problem, we would certainly do that. They'll sometimes ask for some of the groups will ask for armed security for their events, depending on what they're doing, how large their group is. They have to, of course, pay that. We wouldn't pay that for them. And if they want to do it under the lights, because those lights have to be turned on, there's a cost to that. We have a $50 an hour charge involved in that.
Okay, so security, if they ask for it, they would pay the $250
For
$25.
$25 an hour for the event security.
Is this something we need to take action on? Is this just?
No, you can certainly talk about it today. You can take this and we can talk about it at the next meeting, whatever you'd like to do.
I mean, we can look at it, I mean. I would like to give some of these organizations, even for 2 games, a reduced rate, if that's feasible. Okay, I'm not saying free, like a couple other districts, just lower it a little bit more. So they could afford to, because they do a lot of fundraising. And I mean, I don't know why we can't lower it a little. Even if it's a couple $100 for the 4 hours or something, just something. And you can maximize it, say, no more than 2 games. And we can see how it works down the road, is what I would like to see. And you just want to think about it and discuss it next month, that's fine. But that's what I would like to see.
Did we lower it last time?
We did. I think it was, I would be guessing, I'm sorry, I think it was at least $100 an hour, was my guess. Yeah,
I thought that it was 150 and
Yeah,
then it was
lowered.
300 originally for outside groups.
I don't know if we touched the outside groups though,
I don't know,
but we definitely, I think you might be right that we reduced
by half.
by half maybe the NW one, but we can certainly look, we would have that if you want me to bring that
What do
back.
you mean by outside groups? What are you talking about?
So in other words, if it's not a wheat
NWA.
field, if it's not a wheat field group, so not just NWA, but if it's not a wheat field based group, and what we did, the way we determine that is the group has to have at least 50% of its members, 50% or more of its members be residents, right? So that's what allows them to get that reduced rate. So like with NWAA, they have many different groups. Take all of the groups that are in there, all of their names, all of their they get all their addresses, and there's 50% or more, that's all, 50% for that group. They get the reduced rate.
Other comments on that, or take some time to digest it? We can
We
bring it
can
up next
digest it if you
next
want.
meeting. Sure.
We bring it up. on
Well, what do you suggest?
I don't know, just want to help some of these groups
Mhm.
that are,
No, I know what you're saying.
struggling, making money and stuff like that. That's why I said, even if you reduce a couple $100, but max only 2 games. They play a lot more than 2, because the Harvey Field, my guess, is not in really good condition because of the drainage, not because of what we do or don't do. It's just the drainage system. And we don't want no one getting hurt on there, or sometimes they're just practicing the grass, which is fine. But, I think sometimes it becomes a little bit of a safety issue for the young kids.
I just want to say, I don't believe it's a safety issue. No offense, Rick. If I thought it was, we wouldn't practice on there, we wouldn't play on there. I think the reason they want to be on the turf is because it's really nice and it's cool, right? And that's
That's
good.
what they're
Yeah,
telling me.
I know. I'm sure they're saying that, but I'm sure that if they are responsible adults and they're great adults that run those programs. But if they really thought it was a safety issue, they wouldn't play all of their other games on there. They want to get on the turf because it's really nice, right? And it's a great experience for the kids. What I might recommend, if there's any thought of giving certain opportunities, either a reduced rate or something like that, we'd have to come up with a number, because I just want you to think of it this way. Football only has so many games, and it's usually right on weekends, but it could be long block of time. You'd probably have to say something along the lines of this many games would be reduced. So, remember, you have multiple ages of the soccer program, boys and girls. you have multiple ages of lacrosse programs, you have multiple ages. All of those groups would be open to this, right? You know, and I think the tricky part will certainly be once we're in season. So if we started doing this when we're in our seasons, that's when it's really difficult, except for on certain days when we'd of course have to have staff in, like on a Sunday. Right? They'd have to pay to have those people in because there's nobody here. But you know, during the fall or springs seasons, those fields tend to be really taken up by our own teams. So
I guess,
we just have to be really careful in what we say we're willing to do if we can't do it, that's all. So as long as it's within the confines of how we handle and manage the fields now, and if the idea is that you set a number, you know, you get like 2 at half that rate, or whatever it might be, whatever you decide, we just want to make sure that we do it in an equitable way across the board for all of the programs, because they're all gonna want it once you open it for one, that's all,
hey,
okay?
my question is,
And soccer, would they play on a football field and stuff like that?
So right now they use multiple different fields, right? You know, like, do you want to set an age? Do you want to set, like, those are all things I think you would think about, because, you know, the little kids football starts at a really young age. So does the little kids soccer. So does the little kids lacrosse, like that, those programs, once we do it for one, we'd have to do it for all within the constraints of the schedule.
And for soccer, for NWA, what we've traditionally done is just state qualifiers for state cup is on turf, because they're in April and playing on grass in April is not the best. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very limited and select area. The concern I always had, and especially with the youth programs, is that the minute you put 6, 8, 10-year-olds on turf, especially in the warmer months, that turf is a lot hotter than what your grass and air temperature is with grass. So I mean, that's why I'm always very hesitant for any group, you know, when they say they have like 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds that want to be on the turf. Well, when the turf temperature is 130 degrees, those kids will dehydrate a lot faster than an adult will, and hit heat exhaustion because of that. So I mean, I like the price in this particular price because it sort of deters and makes them be more specific of what age groups are going to be on there. And I always also think that with our youth groups, it's something that you should earn, is to be able to play on the nicer facilities as you get older, as opposed to just saying, hey, let's go play on it.
I guess my other question is the maintenance on it. The more we put on that field, the more maintenance it's gonna take us, right? So we have to look at it in that respect too. I mean, we're gonna get a lot more usage on that field. That's gonna end up repairs or whatever we have to do to that field has to be done. So, and I mean, that's gonna be $1, so.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, Rick's idea that, you know, if you were gonna consider it, I would definitely say that you would only consider it for a limited number of contests that you'd discount, right? Because if all of a sudden they can always be there, it really puts a strain. And remember, we put that turf in 2020. I mean, it's getting, you know, they say 10 to 12 years, right, is usually what they say. I mean, it's in really good shape right now. Our people take really good care of it. They make sure that they respread the little rubber and stuff. I mean, that stuff's done, but you know, eventually we're gonna have to replace it anyway, and we don't want to move that schedule up if we don't have to.
Even if you did one game, just give them the opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't want to cause much of a problem here. Just try to give them an opportunity, that one game of a reduced rate. But we can think about it and come back next month.
What if it's a kind of, they bring it to the board, they wanna do for a day, say they wanna do that day, and we'll say, okay. for
Well,
that day.
someone did come. Couple
Let-
months
let-
later.
Was a date, was it a date?
Here's the only thing I worry about that, Bob. I don't know that you want to have to manage that.
Yeah, no,
If you're gonna set,
Yeah.
right, I mean, you don't want each group to have to ask you, if you want to set, that's just my thought,
Yeah. no.
right?
Okay, we can.
Okay, yeah, we'll revisit it next meeting.
Leave it on my comments, please, okay?
Okay, any other items for discussion? We're old business, we have the calendar. Any other comments on the calendar?
Second Rick's motion.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll call for motion, Rick.
Thank you.
Back to the new calendar as presented. Make the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, I go second it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries on the calendar. Any other new business, anybody? Okay, any public comments? Going once, going twice, okay. Any other board member comments tonight?
Just real quick, thanks to Dan, that was nice to go into the schools today and see the principals and give the tours. I didn't get to all of them, but I thought it was new for a newer board member. It was nice to have that interaction and see what's going on. So I thank you for that.
Okay, with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries, we're adjourned, thank you.